welcome to How to Win the Lottery Season 5 on adaptations. We don't have a name for the season yet. We'll figure that out. That's first order of business. I'm Joey Lewandowski. Tulsa.
Yep, that's the name. That's the name. Had stage fright for a second.
Well,
panicked.
we just found out in the last book on A Confederacy of Dunces that Tulsa's a state of mind with why Bob left the show.
I don't remember the context for that, but yes.
It's fine. We are in April now. We are after opening day. How's your fantasy baseball team going?
I'm probably in last place at this point. No, is probably in last place at this point, and I'm in second to last place.
This is a Thursday. There's a chance that we're still in the first matchup, so we're all winless.
Yeah, but I'm spiritually I'm a second to last place guy.
What are we calling this season? Because we had
Unadaptable.
Unadaptable.
Yeah, with a slash between un and adaptable. It's just pronounced unadaptable.
So this is adaptable.
Is it?
Well, it's being adapted.
It's being adapted.
Whether it's adaptable or not, it's becoming a Jonathan Glazer film at some point this year, theoretically. The only person on IMDb, actually, I'm going to take another look, but Max Beck, a super German-looking dude, is playing a guy named Schwarzer, who's not a name I recognize from the book.
No. What? The characters are Thompson?
Mm-hmm. Angelus Thompson, Dahl, and Shmuel.
Paul Dahl, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Hannah Dahl.
Mm-hmm. And Shmuel.
And Shmuel.
Yeah. So this guy, I mean, there's a lot of other characters, but Schwarzer, not a name I remember.
Yeah, so he...
Ooh, we got more people.
Let's do it.
Sandra Huller.
Never heard of her.
Hold on, I'm gonna bring it up on my phone so I can actually spin this around because I don't know if I can spin my laptop with the cables. But this woman, I would say, is Hannah Dahl. I was picturing, so I think, we talked about this a little bit in the season preview. We're kind of doing the season because in every episode that we've done, we'd always talk about, like, if this became a movie, who would you picture or whatever. I was picturing, and I think the whole Jonathan Glazer thing is just like, I'm going to pick German people for this German film, which makes sense. But I was picturing Caitlin Fitzgerald.
No clue.
Masters of Sex. She played Michael Sheen's wife. She's also in Always Shine, the not Mackenzie Davis role.
Yeah. But
here is Sandra Huller. I would imagine that's Hannah Dahl.
Sure. Yeah. She looks kind of like Carey Mulligan.
German Carey Mulligan. We've also got, none of these people have names other than Max Beck. We've got Christian Friedel.
Yeah, that's Will Friedel's brother.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you know who Will Friedel is?
Yeah, the Eric Matthews.
Yeah. And the voice of Batman.
Really?
Batman Beyond.
Wow. I think I knew that, but that's so wild to me.
Yeah.
Dahl, do you think? Or do you think this is... I don't think he's handsome enough to play Thompson.
I mean, he looks young. But yeah, Thompson is very, like, specifically drawn out as, like, Arctic blue eyes, like a strong...
Skarsgård style.
Yeah. And even though, like, when he's being described as being, like, kind of sexy, like, he's like... the tentacled blades of my hands. And it's like, what the fuck are you even talking about when you say that?
Like Max Beck as Schwarzer, I think this is going to be like a Thompson guy. Like, I think this is maybe
for sure.
Right?
For sure. Although, like, when I'm thinking Thompson, I'm thinking like Alexander Skarsgård. That's like the easy go-to. You're looking for like Aryan beauty.
And that's the only other guy with a picture. I don't know who do you think this guy,
I don't know.
Not Shmuel.
No.
It's also, what is The Zone of Interest by Martin? Oh, I didn't even say The Zone of Interest by Martin Amis because I definitely didn't say his name. Totally professional. What is The Zone of Interest about?
It is a love story.
Is it?
Is it a comedy?
Sort of.
Yeah, it's a novel from...
Do people on Goodreads hate that it's a comedy? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can't, people on Goodreads are
dumb,
by and large, fucking idiots. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to, I had this conversation with Meg actually, and I ended up being wrong about it because I looked it up and I ended up being wrong. But Martin Amis is a really interesting author because Martin Amis had a pretty long history as like a left-wing voice or like a socialist.
Okay.
And he's good friends with Christopher Hitchens, Salman Rushdie, that crew of people who also at one point were hailed as sort of left-wing voices. And then 9/11 happened, and they supported the war in Iraq, and they had critical things to say about Islam, and all of a sudden their left-wing bona fides were completely
questioned.
Yeah, thrown out the window, and they were now viewed as these like this trio of like fascists almost.
Okay.
In my memory,
Amos.
including Amos, and in my memory, like he's gotten a lot of political like shit for over the last 20 years.
Okay.
In my memory, this had affected his critical standing significantly. He's had a string of books. He had books, Yellow Dog, House of Meetings, something to do with the train, The Pregnant Widow, Lionel Asbo, Lotto Lout, like a string of books.
Sure.
Some better than the others. House of Meetings is not a great book. Lionel Asbo is not a great book. Pregnant Widow I thought was fantastic. But in my memory, these like he's been like critically derided. So in some ways rightfully so, because he's a older author towards the end of his, not the end of his career, but he's like
in the back nine.
in the back nine of his career, and he's like no longer doing the vital work of his youth. But also I remember him as being maybe wrongfully politically dinged. Like his work, I don't care. I don't give a shit if people think he's a piece of shit. Like that's fine. I don't, for his political opinions, that doesn't bother me one way or the other. But like, in my head, I remember people being like really harsh on his work because of his political opinions that didn't really have anything to do with his work. And then I looked it up, and this book got really good reviews.
So on the wiki, people said that this is his best novel in like 25 years since London Fields.
Sure. Yeah.
This came out in 2014. This is his 14th novel. And it seemed like for a while people were like, I don't know. And then like they're like, oh, this is actually really good.
Oh, so it like suffered a period of like.
I think it seemed like I didn't look into all those books, but it seemed like the consensus was this is his best book in a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think, that makes sense to me. I think The Pregnant Widow was also really good, but The Pregnant Widow is not dealing with themes as difficult as this book is, and not approaching them in like a really unique way. Because what this book does is...
Well, you want to say like where this is set?
It is set in Nazi Germany during the Holocaust. And the main characters are a Nazi liaison officer and that's Thompson. And what is
he's I don't know what his position is, but he's
like
relatively high ranking.
But he's like a hardcore.
He's a
Nazi.
commandant.
He's a hardcore Nazi.
Yeah. Like a guy who, like, spoiler, gets hanged for his crimes in this novel.
Yeah. And you have
they're at a camp that's a stand-in for Auschwitz.
Yeah.
The Cat Zet or whatever.
In a lot of ways, Auschwitz or the concentration camp stuff is like plot wise playing secondary to this, not really torrid, but like somewhat
erotic
affair between Paul Dahl's wife Hannah Dahl
emotional
and
affair.
This guy Thompson. Yeah, a never consummated affair between them.
So the only other thing from the wiki that I have is that the people that were critical of this did not like that it was anticlimactic, which when I read that before I read the book, I was like, Bob's going to love this book. And then
I mean, what the fuck what do they want?
I don't know.
What's the climax of this book that you want? If you're asking for like a big climax.
A literal climax, maybe.
Like, do you want them to fuck? Because the other criticism of the book is that like,
well, the other
that's
criticism
inappropriate,
is overt,
right?
misplaced eroticism.
Yeah, but like that's kind of the point, right?
Because what this novel is about is that the Thompson, really kind of the main character. There's three equally main characters. He's just an officer, falls in love with the commandant's wife, and it's the emotional sort of not even triangle, like the square, because there's also this other guy who like no one really knows what happened to him, and like he's this sort of like this looming specter that like hangs over the entire narrative for a while. But yeah, it's kind of a comedy, kind of a romance, sort of set in a concentration camp.
Well, let's talk about it being a comedy first. like for me, it works as a comedy. And you say people, I didn't read that many Goodreads reviews, but you said people didn't like that it was a comedy. But to me,
I didn't read reviews, but like I just like saw like the most liked review was like a 3-star, then like a 2-star. Just like people that did not. I think people don't appreciate a not that it's lighthearted, but like
it's not lighthearted. I think it's the opposite of lighthearted.
A Nazi narrative that isn't the traditional Nazi narrative. I think people have an issue with.
That is not on its face. It obviously it's critical of these characters, but like the characters themselves are not running around beating themselves up over it, and they're not like feeling awful about the Holocaust taking place.
So the novel is told. There's like 6 chapters, and each chapter is 3 sub-chapters from the point of view of one of 3 main characters, Thompson, Dahl, Shmuel.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are Nazis. One is a Jewish interned prisoner.
But he's a Sonderkommando, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is?
A Jewish person who is essentially working for the Nazis.
Right. Not really by choice, but... You know.
Yeah, no, not by choice. Right. By to save himself, to save his family, to save whatever the context is for why someone would do something like that.
And so a lot of the novel, like Thompson seems like a pretty okay dude. And I think what caught me a lot was that like he's still a Nazi.
It is a direct illustration of Hannah Arendt's banality of evil, which is the idea that true evil doesn't exist in the form of supervillains. It doesn't exist in one guy ordering a huge genocide. True evil exists in the petty bureaucrats who are just doing their job and don't necessarily push back enough or don't resist and are just like trying to get along as normal people and, you know, say it's not me. It's the person that's giving me orders. It's not me. It's, I'm not responsible for this. I have to take care of myself. Blah, 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 blah. Because you have an interesting theme to me that you hear over and over again throughout this book is different German characters going like, well, nobody really likes the Jews, but this is ridiculous. Right. Like we are going like, don't you think we're going a little too far? And so it's like it reflects easily to pick whatever country, whatever culture you're part of, but it reflects really easily to the people who are racist and who are all of these awful things, but like aren't actively daily racist, but like their passive racism, even if they would resist like watching a black person get shot or something like that.
They're like in this, they're racist because it's easier to be racist than
yeah.
It's easier to like be a Nazi and kill Jews than to fight back.
Right. Which is exactly like how racism or other forms of hate like really takes root in a society because it's just easier.
And what I thought was really fascinating about, like, I liked the first half of this more than the second half. Like, I think I kind of lost either the narrative or the lack of the narrative or whatever. And I still liked it overall. But what I was like struck by over and over early on is like how likable Thompson is because he's just like a guy doing a job. And then you get to the doll section. It's just like, it's tough to get through because he's a monster. He's an actual monster.
Yeah.
And like, even when he's not even talking about the Jews, when he's just talking about like his wife, like he's talking about like raping his wife and like ownership of his wife and like how she owes him and like all of like, it's just every way he describes everything. It's just like, this is horrific.
Yeah. And it's a juxtaposition of him with the normal guy so that you see the difference between, Hitler and just some guy on the street who let things happen. And then you personally like realize that you're rooting for someone who is also ultimately a Nazi. Mm-hmm. And then you go like, oh shit, well, I don't, that's not what I'm like, the joke's on me. I shouldn't be rooting for that guy. He's bad.
Cause it almost feels like if you're almost kind of able to remove yourself in a way where like Thompson's like almost like an American soldier's like, or like any nationality, right? Yeah. Where he's just like at war and he's just trying to like get laid and like, he falls in love with a woman and like he just like he doesn't like doing his job, he's doing his job.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh wait, no, but he's like on historically the bad guys. And then you get to Dahl, you're like, but he's not really. I mean, it's a weird, and I can see why people would be uncomfortable with the position in which the novel puts you as deciding what is actually evil.
Right. I mean, the comedy to me comes from absurdism comes from the idea that these people are pretending like they're living regular lives, and they're casually like looking into this abyss, and the worst thing that they have to deal with is the smell, right? Because the smell is something that keeps on coming up over and over again. Right. And it's like, when I say comedy, I don't mean like it's funny. Like I'm not laughing at it, but it's like
dark humor.
Yeah. It's showing us that you know, the best way to analyze life is through this kind of realism, because I think this is probably much more realistic than other Holocaust, World War II, Nazi type books. The best way to look at this stuff is through realism, because realism is, in these circumstances that are so horrific, is completely indistinguishable from the absurd. And the absurd is manipulated to show us that, like, in order to capture what the actual human emotions are in this circumstance, it has to be presented in this way that when we read it, we go, that's fucking ridiculous.
Right.
Because like real life is ridiculous. And sometimes when fiction attempts to do like kitchen sink realism, it doesn't work, because we look at things and go, well, that's too dramatic, or that's too ironic, or that's this, or that's that. And by like capturing the you know, life in this like metered dramatic way, we lose the actual blood and guts of real life, and like the horror of it.
And Hannah kind of is the reader in a way where like she starts like losing her mind and like laughing at funerals and stuff, because she's like, what are we even doing?
Yeah.
That's why her husband, one of many reasons probably, other than he's just insane and a psychopath,
she also
wants to murder her.
I mean, yeah, she also makes an effort to publicly embarrass him
right.
at many points, which for someone like him, like there is like, we were talking a little bit earlier about Martin Amis as like this purveyor of quote unquote lad lit, which was a genre of British literature that was like primarily focused on maleness and like the perils or the boisterousness of masculinity. And something that Amos has been criticized for a lot is his lack of depth for his female characters, because he's so hyper-focused on masculinity and things like that. So Hannah does have she has less screen time, less page
adaptations, baby,
less page time than all the other characters. She's
she's also not telling the story. She's a subject in the story.
She's not given a voice. She is a subject or an object of the story. But she's also in some ways if there is a moral center, I don't know. Is that correct? Is she a moral center? That's probably not accurate.
I don't know that she's any more or less a moral center than like Thompson. I think they're both like, I don't think either of them want to be there.
There is a thing in the very beginning where they're talking about it and they're like, it's not Thompson and it's Thompson and maybe I forgot the character's name, but he's like, like girls don't want to be here. It's just like weirdo guys that are here. And they're like, and then the other guy's like, no, some women like it. And he's just like, yeah, but they're not women that you'd like want to talk to.
Right.
It's like the women who like it are real sickos.
Yeah. Again, kind of comedy, but not really. Like it's pointing out not the absurdity of war, but the absurdity of war. The people who self-select to be like career Nazis who want to be there killing people.
Yeah, even if it's the path of least resistance, because I think a lot of people were Nazis because it was the path of least resistance. But like those people are also culpable for immense crimes, because if you have it's hard to say decision, because some people are, their lives are threatened. But if you have the decision to be a Nazi or not be a Nazi, the being a Nazi is a crime.
Yeah. I like, one of my favorite things throughout is like the sort of the subtle ways that like you can tell that things aren't going well. Because if the entire thing was told from Dahl's perspective, you would think that like there's no way they don't lose the war. Like everything is going swimmingly, like everything is going according to plan. Mm-hmm. But then like I think it's Thompson who's like talking like you just like see dirt and grime places and like there's just like people not on the streets, and it's just like this weird like the reality of the situation sets in. And I think that's why having the three different perspectives, even though Shmuel is like always like maybe like 3 or 4 pages, like very short, so it's kind of more too, but like the disparate, like the free perspectives, it's like, no, like that guy's crazy. Like that's not actually what's happening.
Yeah, it's also using the 3 different voices is also, and this is something when I first started reading this book, I was like, oh yeah, like this is this is like a certain kind of literature that's very language based and like a guy that has honed his craft over a long period of time. And he's not like culturally caught up in any moment. He's a guy that like developed an incredible skill and is now deploying that skill to tell stories. And I found it remarkable because even at the end of that first chapter, he describes this guy as being like a bruise underneath the fingernail. And I remember I texted you and I was like, sometimes it's just like,
yeah,
there are some people that are just like hella good at describing shit. Right. And as the book like went on, I was kind of like, oh yeah, like Martin Amis is also a show off. Like he's definitely like deploying this beyond like its measured need. He like enjoys sentences on a word by word level, and something like what he's doing by having 3 separate perspectives. And you don't get this a lot anymore because I don't think that many people, I don't want to shit on current literature because I love current literature, but like this is a talent that is atrophied, is he's using 3 wildly distinct voices to tell a story within one story.
Yeah.
Right. He has mastered this idea of the first person narrative that is entirely told in an individual voice.
Yep.
And telling a story in an individual voice is like, you know, it's doing an impression for 200 pages. It's remarkable.
Which is fascinating considering the reason we're covering this is because it's being adapted. And it's like, how do you translate this? And you were saying that there might be filming more than one version of this.
This is the rumor. The rumor is that Jonathan Glazer is in post-production developing different movies from different perspectives. So in my imagination, we would get a Paul Dahl movie and a Thompson movie.
Do you think you like just like would it all, do you think, look the same, or they like color grade it different? Like how would you distinguish the actual, or
yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because I think that's like what I'm kind of excited about with this season is that like the things that are unadaptable, it's going to be like, well, you know, how would you do it or whatever. But here, just like we're going to see theoretically, unless things go catastrophically wrong and like things don't come out, like we're going to see how they actually adapt this stuff.
Yeah, and for this, it's like I you know what I was thinking of because Jonathan Glazer has made Sexy Beast, which is a movie that has sort of almost like Nicholas Winding Refn colors, and like that sort of
like primary colors, sort of not saturated, but like
filters,
bold,
like
yes,
and like is sort of like vocal in a very like gangster way. Like you have Ben Kingsley yelling and cursing, and you have Ray Wyatt, Ray
Wise?
No. Ray Wise is the guy from Twin Peaks.
Yes.
No, it's
can't look it up.
Yeah, I forgot. He's the guy that's in all the Alan Clark movies from the 80s. But he is and it's a completely different movie from Birth, which is the Nicole Kidman movie where she believes that her husband has been reincarnated as a child, and that movie is shot really traditionally, but like with long tracking shots and stuff like that.
But that movie very. So I think like Sexy Beast feels very European. Birth feels very New York. Like look and feel.
Yeah.
Under the Skin feels very Euro.
Yeah, and Under the Skin is a movie that is like and Birth is also a movie that it's a very talkative movie. A lot of the art, it's not as visual as Sexy Beast or Under the Skin, but it's a movie that is like very talkative. You have them talking through this very complex problem. And Under the Skin is a movie that's almost entirely visual, shot with non-actors a lot of the time.
And no screenplay, really. Or no script, at least.
And no script. And this like very, very striking alien visuals so it's like you don't really know where this movie is going to come down. But he had a short film. I forget the name of it. It was like,
is it in that? Because over there,
no, it's not. It's not because it's new.
Oh, Strasbourg 1518.
Yeah, that's the one.
I just watched it last week.
Where it's like people doing dancing.
It's
okay.
It's like the world's best dancers recreating this like hysteria that swept this town 500 years ago
when people couldn't stop dancing. Right. Yeah. And so watching that, I was like, oh, that's what Zone of Interest is going to look like. Those are the colors, and those are the like the body movements, and
it's brown and
yeah, exactly.
jerky.
Yes, yeah. That's what I think. That's what I think this movie's going to look like.
I either through you or just because Jonathan Glazer also probably through you or whatever. Like I had that on my watch list and I was just like looking through my Letterboxd watch list. And I'm like, oh, this is like 10 minutes long. And I found like it's on Canopy, like the library thing. And I'm just like, okay, let me watch this. I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah.
And like, I've never seen something else before that the genres are musical and horror. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
And like, it's not really horror, but it also is horror.
That's
like,
exactly what I think this movie's going to be. I think this movie's going to be, I think it's going to juxtapose the like quote unquote eroticism with sort of background horrific visuals and very like brown and gray. And you're going to like go into it and the juxtaposition of those two things are going to make you incredibly uncomfortable.
Do you think there will be things to laugh at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like even like Schindler's List has that really funny scene where he like the gun keeps jamming. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't seen it since 8th grade.
Yeah, it's not a great movie.
Really?
Yeah, Schindler's List is there are better movies than Schindler's List.
The only thing I remember about Schindler's List, and this is a wild dismissal of, you know, an Academy Award winning film, is the girl in the red coat, because that's like the thing that everybody remembers. And that my 8th grade English teacher who showed it to us put a piece of paper up in front of the screen when the naked women were in the showers. I'm just like, I feel like we're not like really fetishizing these women who are about to die here. Like,
We watched a Holocaust video when I was in a history class when I was in high school. And a kid named, you can bleep this out, his name.
I was explaining how like you tell a lot of stories about people and like you have to bleep out every name. It's you know, I appreciate it.
And he leaned over to me when we were watching that video and he goes, "They say the camera puts on 10 pounds." And I was just like, you're the fucking worst person alive. That's like such a fucked up thing to say when you're like a 14, 15-year-old watching and he got kicked out of class for it. And he got, it was like, Mr. Redu kicked him out. Sorry to derail.
Let's talk about Kruger. So Kruger was a communist.
Freddy Krueger
was a communist. Dieter Freddy Krueger was a communist that Hannah was in love with, like lost her virginity to, like her first love, her only love before her husband.
Yeah.
And she lost track of him. And the only real plot in this story for the most part is like trying to figure out what happened to that guy.
Yeah. And what is he's like I don't know. I'm trying to like track his like arc, which goes
because like what's confusing is that like you hear all these like falsehoods, like because this novel takes place over the course of like 10 years.
Yeah, with the
it's like
aftermath,
5 or 6 years, and then it jumps ahead 3 years, and there's like whatever.
Yeah,
but like there's all these different things about like, oh, he's still alive, he's in a camp, he got killed in a camp or whatever, and then like at the very very end you find out that like in 1934, like way before the war started, really, he was like humiliated and like put all like these medals like into his bare skin and then like killed, just, you know, but like way before any of this. And so he's been dead for like a decade or whatever, but he's this one who like Hannah's trying to figure out because she like doesn't like her current husband, and like Thompson's trying to figure out if he can like help her, and Dahl is furious because he first sees Thompson as a threat, and then he's like, oh no, that guy's definitely gay. It's like, well, like he's saying like he's gay like in the same thought as he's like, you know, I'm gonna go home and like rape my wife, like just like horrific. But like Kruger is, I mean, long dead for the narrative, but he's the one that like kind of hangs over, like he's the driving force for like why kind of 3 of the main characters are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and he exists as an ideological opposition in some ways to like Nazism, I guess, because like the Russians end up being like an immense force. The Russians and communism end up being an immense force against Nazism and all that stuff. I don't know. It's hard to make something out of it.
Shmuel, let's talk about, Shmuel has like, okay, so one thing that I appreciated, did not love, but I understood why, is there's a lot of foreign language dialogue in this that's not translated.
It makes it hard to like, it interrupts when your eyes scanning across the page and you can't, it makes it hard to read quickly.
Sometimes like the important things are then translated. Like at the end, so like Dahl has this plan to kill his wife where Shmuel's going to kill his wife. Yeah. And then Shmuel, who like talks about this like unbelievable act of kindness that Hannah Dahl just like made eye contact with him, that she treated him like a human for like, even like a fraction of a second, decides to try to kill himself. Like, this is what your husband wanted me to do. And so then Dahl kills him in front of her. but his final line in German, and like I put the book down and like I translated it, and then like at like a couple paragraphs later they explain like this is he wanted me to do this to you or whatever. But
yeah,
like,
it's weird because you assume that they're speaking German not the entire time. So why why move in between these two?
It's the kind of thing where like if you're watching a movie that like you got from some like questionable source and like there's no dialogue, there's no subtitles for a thing. It's just like, is that a choice or like did the subtitles just like fuck up?
Yeah.
And like here it's like, no, this is just all in print, but there's like some stuff in French, there's a lot in German, there's like other stuff, and I'm just like, what are we doing this for? And like,
right.
I get it, but also like I appreciate it, but I don't really
part of it is show
it.
off shit. I remember picking up an Anthony Burgess book when I was in high school because it was like the Clockwork Orange guy, and I opened it and it was like a 500-600 page book, and I started reading it, and then it was like all the prose was in English, and then I got to the dialogue and the dialogue was in German. I was just like, why are you doing this to me? What the fuck? What is this? Why like hit me with that? I don't need that. Come on, Anthony Burgess, you're just showing off.
Yeah, and
so
like,
I think like a lot of like Martin Amis is a lot of the time here flexing his muscles because that's not like, yeah, I guess anyone could kind of do that where it's like look at like all you need to do is know basic German or get someone to translate to German for you. But like I think a lot of times he's like interested in doing things that other people aren't doing just for the sake of it, to show, to like flex those muscles.
And like in that example I was saying before, like that's one where like you don't need to know what he's saying because like they describe that he turns the needle on himself or whatever. It's like I get this, and then they translate it. But there's like other entire exchanges where it's not. I'm just like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I didn't translate any of that because to me it's like when an author does that, they're trying to alienate me in some way,
right?
And so like I try to sit inside that alienation instead of try to like fight my way out of it by learning what they're talking about. And I don't know that that's the right way to do it.
That was the only time because I'm just like I noticed here for a point. I don't know what the point is really. I don't know that I appreciate. Or I don't know that I like the.
What
point,
is it translated to? Do you remember?
Very literally says it like right at the bottom of that page. Actually, he wanted me to do this to you.
Oh, so it's just he's.
Eigentlich wollte das ich Ihnen das tue or something.
So there's nothing like it's not even poetic. It's not like he's not like hitting us with a line of.
And I can see in an adaptation choosing not to subtitle things.
Yeah,
which would be cool. Like
West Side Story style.
Or you hate Pacific Rim, right?
Whatever, it's fine.
But there's a line where she whispers and like I went home and I'm like, what did she say? And it's like it just says like I love you or whatever. But I think like that can be an artistic choice. But when it's 100% text,
I'm fine with Pacific Rim, but there are plot holes. Let's just say that. let's say there are plot holes in Pacific Rim. Keep going
because that came up for whatever reason like 3 weeks ago, like maybe the last time we recorded or whatever. So
it comes up a lot. I've had the Pacific Rim conversation many times with many people.
Yeah, there are plot holes. There are literal holes, but whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think it could be interesting because I think like emotional, like it's. In a film, it's like saying what they're saying does not matter as much as what's happening or how they're saying it. But when it's all just text, it's like, come on, guy.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like I don't hate it, but it's a little frustrating.
Again, I think it's a move to alienate the reader, and like I enjoy the feeling of alienation. I wish that had not just been a literal translation. I wish that he had said something that was like. It's like when people talk about what Bill Murray whispers in Scarlett Johansson's ear at the end of Lost in Translation, and then you hear it and you're like, that actually is kind of nice. But at the same time, it's also like, I don't need to know,
right? Because
I know what their relationship is. So like, if this guy's putting a gun to his head and he's about to,
or in this case, a needle to his ribs.
Yeah, sure, a metaphorical gun to his head.
Yeah.
I don't need him to say. Actually, I was supposed to do this to you. that's just like directly explaining the plot, but in German for some reason.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, I don't know. Like I wish that he had said something maybe in Yiddish or Hebrew or something that would have been interesting.
Yeah, instead of German.
Yeah.
But it's German. I guess he's saying it for her benefit. He's not saying it for his own benefit, right? But yeah, I don't know. I also like what I didn't understand, and this is maybe not worth going into, but like they talk about how like he like Dahl like kills him and like takes away this like final act or whatever, but like it also feels like he kind of saves him from like the mortal sin of suicide, and like that's not really mentioned.
Oh, I didn't. But it didn't even occur to me.
They're like he was trying to do this heroic thing, and like Dahl took that away from him, which I understand. But it's also like, theoretically he can get into heaven now, or or whatever, right? But who knows? That's neither here nor there. But Shmuel's saying things like, "I love my wife, but I'm glad I'll never see her again." There's like standalone lines, which is like, "Holy, what are we?"
Well, he's also as like a Sonic Commandos are characters. Like even the character that you're supposed to feel for here is like, if people don't think highly of Sonic Commandos, right? Because they have essentially sold out their own people and are trading in lives in order to save themselves.
But it does seem, again, relatively, who knows, like he's one of the good ones, because he'll like tell people like basically how to die more painlessly.
Sure.
But it's still like horrific.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like that's the thing. It's like, what I really liked is the wrong word, but the drudgery of going to work. It's like, oh, we have so much work tomorrow. There's gonna be a train with 250 people and we have to kill them all. It's just like, holy.
This is what I'm talking about when like I think like Thompson especially is the reflection of that banality. There's the entire sections where like they're welcoming the Jews who are coming in on the trains, and they're just like being really kind to them, and like really like making it seem like, oh, leave your stuff here. We'll take you over here. There's a big meal waiting, and like everyone is like kind of accepting of it. And then as the novel progresses, it's like they start to get yelled at because it's like, oh, you're not saying that like you mean it anymore.
Well, no, because the one thing that I remember is that like they're talking about like how they're like just like trying different, like either just because like they're trying to be more efficient, or just because like they're getting bored, they want to just try new shit. They're like why would you tell them to put their valuables in the thing? Like they're gonna think they're never gonna get back. It's just like, oh yeah, I guess that was a bad idea. It's just like this like weird like just kids like acting as adults, but like they're adult. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know what to do. Like we're gonna wing things. It's like, but again, this is a depiction of like one of the most prolonged bouts of evil, and it's just like just dumb people trying dumb things. Mm-hmm. It's weird in like a way that I appreciate it, but at a certain point, I'm just like it's never not tough to read.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's always interesting when an author like decides to put themselves in a place where over a sustained period of time, they're not embracing, but like embodying that kind of darkness. So like, I don't know how long this took Martin Amis to write, but I'd imagine that for years, he was like living in the heads of these characters and trying to figure out, because like everything, like a really like basic creative writing, and like this is not true of experimental writers necessarily, or true of maybe modern contemporary writers that are writing like auto fiction based things, but like people like Martin Amis, like a very like basic creative writing principle is like you have to find the motivation for every character, and you have to like understand those goals on their terms. Right. And so like understanding the goals of these characters on their terms is a very difficult thing to do, because we have a knee jerk, and I don't mean knee jerk, and it's the correct reaction. I think we have a knee jerk reaction towards hatred of these people because of their crimes, and so the idea of like pulling back that knee jerk reaction so that you can find a place where you can understand their motivation and understand them as human beings, which is the only way that this book works, is if you look at Thompson as a human being. Yeah, like if you don't buy into that, there's nothing to buy into. Done. Yeah. So, which is what I think some of the Goodreads stuff is. Right. Like I understand a Goodreads negative, and I don't blame someone for a negative review like this of someone who's just like I want to sympathize with the Nazi, and it's like, fine, that's like a totally legitimate point of view. But at the same time, like the reason why you sympathize with a Nazi, it doesn't mean you have to like feel bad for them or anything, but it's like, if you can understand human motivation for something, then you can like realize that it's not some like satanic evil that's come up from underneath the earth. It's just some shit that happens because people are too afraid to like resist it at all, you know?
Right. it's a weird, it's not empathy, but it's like something close to empathy, or it's like understanding, or
Yeah, I think it's just like a psychological understanding of it, of like a basic human truth.
yeah. Where does this fall among the, how many of his books have you read? A lot of them, or just a handful of them?
No, a lot of them I've read. Rachel Papers, Dead Babies, London Fields, Money, Pregnant Widow, Einstein's Monsters,
Time's Arrow,
House of Meetings.
So most of his books.
I would say most of his books. Yeah, that's 8, but I think
plus this one is 9.
This is 9
of at least 15. I think this is a 15th. So
yeah, and there's some
couple that since then maybe.
There's some that I own. Lionel Asbo I've read. Yeah.
So
I've
where does
read
this,
most of his books.
How does this compare in terms of what you enjoy about his writing, and in terms of quality of his writing?
So he's got two or three modes. Like he has like things that are like social and sex comedies that he writes, which I really like Dead Babies, Rachel Papers, like his early stuff is more in that. And then like there's other stuff where he's like, and The Pregnant Widow is kind of like that too. And there's other stuff where he's like much more like take me seriously as an artist. And that's like Einstein's Monsters, House of Meetings, Time's Arrow, this one. And that's like where he's really investigating nuclear war,
right,
or the Holocaust, or like the really dark parts of humanity. So where does this fall? I mean, it's like those are such different modes, but this is in the top 5 or so probably.
And you did you love this? Would you say you love this book or no?
Yeah. No, maybe. I don't know. No, you know what? Not top 5. Probably just outside of the top 5, because the top 5 is going to be.
Do you like Time's Arrow more than this?
Yeah, Time's Arrow is a better book, and Time's Arrow is also like Time's Arrow is like a feat because it's so unbelievably creative and has like does
it goes
stuff,
backwards to forwards, right?
Yeah, it does stuff that I like. I look at it and I'm like, this is sorcery. I have no idea how a human being wrote this.
I don't remember. Had you read this one before or no?
No.
So this was new to you.
Yeah,
okay,
this is new to me.
Because I think that like there's also, again, like we briefly touched on it before, but something that you have said over and over again that you not only are okay with, but like is the non-ending here.
Oh yeah,
I think there is an ending.
No, there is. The stuff with Shmuel is like that. That's an ending.
Well, that's an ending, and then also just like her being like, "I can't be with you, man," because you reminded me of that place. Like, I don't.
No, that's beautiful too. Because she's like, because I think like directly what she says is it's something along the lines of like, you know, when we were there, you were the only sane person. Like
right.
you were this like island of like peace and normality in this sea of like decay and brutality. And then now that we're outside of that sea of brutality,
it's like you were the best Nazi, but you're still the Nazi.
Yeah. Now you just remind me of that awful thing that we lived through together. So like that's also an ending. That's
right.
an ending.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that there's like, I can sort of see maybe a better way to say is that instead of a lack of an ending, there's like a lack of a middle. Almost like there's
okay, yeah, that's a yeah,
because like it ends in a place. It begins like you know what it begins with, but like there's like I think I just kind of like I was saying, I kind of got lost in like I'm not exactly sure what's happening here.
Yeah.
I think because largely nothing's kind of happening. They're all just kind of like standing around and like it feels like as this is going along, time moves more quickly and like the war is coming to an end and Germany is falling apart, and like instead of spending an entire chapter in like an afternoon, a chapter will now cover weeks or months or something.
Yeah, which is always I almost always look at that as being like a flaw in a book.
Did you think that was a flaw here?
Yeah. I like structural consistency. Like if you're going to spend 100 pages in a day, I don't want to then spend 100 pages on 10 years.
Right.
I want to spend you 300 pages on 3 days. You
right.
know,
well, you'd be okay with like jumping ahead 10 years and spending another 100 pages on another day 10 years from now.
Yes,
but yeah,
like I like structural consistency, and that has a lot to do with like how we approach temporality and things like that. Because it can be like you said, you get like, I guess in like that long beginning where he's like goes to her house and is like sort of weasels his way inside so that he can talk to her over a long period. And like we have that as like, that's pretty long. And then we start moving more quickly. And it's like, well, I know that we had to introduce those characters, but I don't need all the background stuff. Cause I think that is like, it's already in our heads. This idea of what's happening to Germany.
Right.
Right. What I want from these characters is I want them in this moment reacting to everyday life and that stuff being in the background, because what I don't know is I don't know how that stuff affected the everyday lives of people like Thompson and Hannah and Paul.
And I think that's the thing where it's like you have to provide some kind of context, but also like you don't need context for this because everybody already has so much historical context for this kind of thing where it's like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, where it's like you kind of want to like you feel, or I would feel maybe as a writer, which I'm not, like compelled to like explain like what's going on, but you don't need to because like people already have that history. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he's got a great short story called God, is it called The Day in the Life of Muhammad Atta? Anyway, it's about the last day of Muhammad Atta's life.
I'll look that up. Yeah.
Like the story ends before the plane hits the World Trade Center.
The last days of Muhammad Atta.
The last days of Muhammad Atta. So the story ends before the plane hits the World Trade Center, but it's like, you know, in fiction, there's this rule of showing and not telling, and he just tells. But like, you don't need to show the World Trade Center falling because it's like just saying 9/11. It's like who can't just like pull up that in their brain and like watch the towers fall. It's so like ingrained in everybody of any age that would be reading a story called The Last Days of Muhammad Atta.
And I think that's why like this is. I want to make sure I use the right words. Like, I don't know if I would say interesting, but like they don't actually show them murdering people.
Yeah.
They just talk about doing it. And it's like the bureaucracy of mass murder. And like that's, again, interesting is the wrong word, but like that's interesting because it's not like the typical World War II concentration camp narrative is either like pain and suffering or like American GIs like swashbuckling their way through and like saving the day or whatever.
Yeah.
And this like just
never by the way, Russians saving the day, who like Russians liberated anyway.
The Russians are the biggest enemy in this book, right? They're like, and they're like, oh, but like the Russians, like every one German is good for 10 Russians. They're like, you sure about that? Like, I'm not, you know. But yeah, like just like the whole like just a bunch of Germans just like trying to get through the war because they don't want to be there either, and just like trying to get later or whatever, or like worried about mice and like trying to find a cat to mouse.
And also the everyday life of Germans, like they weren't seeing murder. They weren't, so it was like ignorable for them. And they heard rumors, but probably when they heard those rumors, they were like, it can't be that bad.
Right.
Like this is like inflated stuff because it's like people are telling stories, right? Or the stories that they heard were that it wasn't that bad. It was, you know, whatever. So they could ignore it because they were always given some level of deniability. Right. And that's how you get away with committing genocide, because you provide the decent people with a level of deniability so that they don't have to get involved.
Right. Yeah. Do you think when it gets adapted?
I was thinking of Vicky Creeps, by the way, as Hannah.
Okay.
But she might be. I had a tough time in my head picturing how old these characters were, because I think they're young.
I get the sense
that Paul's old.
I was picturing Dahl and his like maybe around 50, but Hannah was maybe like 35.
Well, because she was unbelievably young when they got married.
Right. Which was like 10-ish years maybe earlier.
Yeah. So
maybe she's even younger. Maybe she's like 28, 30.
Yeah. And
I was picturing Thompson sort of her age. Like,
Thompson is her age. It says in the very beginning.
Maybe they're both like late 20s.
Okay.
And he and Dahl, male Dahl is like 45. Ken Dahl. Ken Dahl Roy.
Well, Dahl is like, there's a very like Dickensian idea of Dahl in that case for.
Right. So in terms of the adaptation, do you think, throwing aside the multiple narratives thing, do you think, will there be like segmented, like, do you think it'll be structured similar? Because I do think the structure of the novel is really well done. Again, the pacing I have issues with, but like the actual like perspective, reset, perspective. Like I like that. Do you think that the movie will cover in that same kind of thing, or will it just tell like a story of like these people and we'll go from scene to scene and like not necessarily in order?
You know what was messing with me with the idea of different perspectives is that the The last 3 chapters of the book are all Thompson's perspective. They abandoned that,
and they're like written like Esther and stuff. And I'm just like, oh,
yeah. They abandoned the conceit,
in the aftermath,
which is another problem that I have because I like structural consistency with something. So it's like,
well, Shmuel is dead and Dahl is dead.
Yeah, so you can't do it. But it's like don't do 3 chapters.
Just do Thompson.
Just do the one Thompson chapter and have it be,
because it doesn't seem like there's a reason to break it up either. The way they break it up either.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'd have to, maybe I'll read this book again and try to, because there's still some stuff that I'm like trying to figure out about it, and that's one of them, the structural stuff, because it seems really like it's so specifically structured that then to think of something as being like a structural flaw to it feels weird to me, because it's not a mistake that I think Martin Amis would make. So I tend to in those cases assume that there's something that I haven't quite gotten yet.
Right.
No, yeah, like that's the thing that when I was reading and I got to the end, I was like, oh, how, if we're doing movies from multiple movies from different perspectives, how exactly do we end this movie? How exactly do we end Paul's narrative
when he gets ostensibly arrested?
Does
maybe
it end with the Nuremberg? I mean,
I don't know,
but that seems like, because that's such a like,
or maybe Hannah takes it over. Maybe Hannah takes over his narrative.
Yeah, because that's such a like, let's wrap it up. But
right.
like, I think Jonathan Glazer, Under the Skin was such a departure from that novel that I think Jonathan Glazer is probably using this as a sketch.
Well, I think a thing that we will probably talk about in every time we talk about an adaptation is that like the best adaptations don't treat the text like gospel, right? Like it's just,
for sure.
You can't make a book into a movie. You take the story, you take the ideas, you take the feeling it evokes or whatever, and then you turn that into a movie.
Are we going to watch this movie and do a mini ep about it? Or
we can, but like this episode comes out in April, and like the movie might not come out till like November. Who knows? But like,
it would fuck up our structure, and then all of my complaining about having specific structures would be
Patreon, baby. Patreon.com/lotterypod. We'll figure it out. But I mean, it would be so dumb if we read these 6 books, talk about these for an hour each or whatever, and then don't see the movie or don't talk about the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, unless we're like, this book sucks, whatever book, pick a book, whatever. But no, I think also, like, I want to see these movies.
This movie's going to, I like, my prediction is that this movie is going to be the best movie that comes out the year that it's released.
Well, I think in theory, they're all coming out this year. Whether that's true or not.
2023, write it down. Zone of Interest by Jonathan Glazer is going to be the best movie of the year.
I'm excited that our next 2 authors, we still got mailbag and stuff, but I'm excited that our next 2 authors are like arguably my 2 favorite authors.
DeLillo and Otessa.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah, for sure.
Pretty solid back to back. It's them and maybe Amelia Gray. Not maybe Amelia Gray, but like those are the 3 that I would go to. Mm-hmm. And I've only read like 1 or 2 things by each of them, but like, and they're almost all explicitly because of you. But like,
did you read Point Omega? You did, right?
I did.
Yeah. We got to do that for the thing. Just because everybody hates that book except for me.
Well, we can do that in a state module, maybe.
I want to force people into it.
All right, we have an email address, lottery@cageclub.me. We also have the Patreon. I think if any of these movies come out while this season is going, we just release it on the main feed. But if they're all like in the fall, because this season ends early September, and the last book, like the last adaptation, because we're alternating, the last book is Unadaptable, Jest. So the last adapted movie comes out in August. So it feels like if any of these are like awards, like that, who knows? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
This is an award season movie.
Yeah. Eileen could be.
Yeah.
Memory probably won't be. No. Project Hail Mary could be, but probably won't be. H Mart, I don't think it's actually going to come out this year. And Night Bitch isn't, right?
I don't know.
Who knows? Anyway, patreon.com/lotterypod if you want to go get. We don't do other bonus episodes. Just don't give us money there, but if you want, whatever. If you want to support the show, I'm the most milquetoast about this Patreon. Like, give us money if you want, but don't. Like, there's no content there. There's the J from C Minute. We have like 11 of those up. Do you remember a couple episodes ago, you like went off on that woman who was reviewing books in alphabetical order? I had an MP3. I'm like, why is MP3 like just some woman's name? And I'm like, oh, right. Because like she was like, it wasn't the Bible. We talked about the Bible. I don't remember, but she was like reviewing insane things alphabetically.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like,
yeah, I have a vague memory of it. Why are you asking?
Because that could be like a Patreon bonus episode. Oh. It's not, but it could be. Anyway, we have
Tulsa yells at the internet.
lottery@cageclub.me if you want to write in. Our girl Egg wrote in Meg's reaction to The Zone of Interest. I like this book, she says. End of email. Wow. Just kidding. This is a long email, so settle in.
Good joke, Joe.
I found that the form of having all three characters worked in an interesting way. The tonal difference in each of their sections was cool. I like that you could have told which character was narrating even without the chapter markers. Yeah. It kind of goes from like normal to brutal to sad.
Yeah. I like, again, like it's a thing that people seem to not do anymore. And that he does it and does it so well it feels like a throwback somehow.
I'm trying to think of other books that I've read like with like that, and it doesn't really go back and forth. It goes and then comes back, but like Cloud Atlas is like that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Which I love. That's one of my favorite.
Another book that is like wildly ambitious.
Yeah.
And he's also like one of those people that has more talent than he knows what to do.
I own all of his books. Would I like other of his books?
I think so. I think sometimes like he's one of those guys. I say this about
David Mitchell? Robert Mitchell.
David Mitchell.
Because there's David Robert Mitchell, who's the It Follows guy.
No, but he's like David Mitchell, like the guy from Peep Show.
Okay.
He's one of those guys who is more talented than like his talent fucks him up.
Oh.
Like he's so good.
He's like ahead of his skis.
Yeah, like Norman Mailer is like this too. Like Norman Mailer is one of my all-time favorite writers, and just like you read a Norman Mailer book and you're just like, Norman, you're doing too much. Like you like want to show the world that you're the greatest writer ever to live. And what it's showing us is that you have no interest in the reader or in like.
Is that a sign of a bad editor or just like?
No, I don't know what it's a sign of. I think it's a sign of a person who is talented to a fault. That's it.
Okay.
There are other people that are like that too.
What I think is interesting about that is that like that's an inherently literary problem. Like a movie is just bad. You know what I mean? Like you can't be such a good filmmaker that like it gets bad. It's just like if you're a good filmmaker, you make a good movie.
I think here's a controversial. It's controversial because there's an outside chance that the person that I'm going to say this about may hear it.
You want to bleep?
No. But I think that Blake Butler is like that. I think he is, and there's like Blake Butler stuff where I have no idea what the fuck he's doing. Like it's like so beyond me that I'm just like, it feels like a fucking alien wrote this, which like I enjoy in a certain way, but also like I read his books and I'm just like sometimes I'm like, bro.
Well,
like pull it back a little bit so that
in all things, not just books, but like watching someone demonstrate that they're very good at what they do is amazing.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it can go too far.
I want to be clear that like this is a compliment. Like I think Blake Butler is so astoundingly talented that he leaves his audience behind, and that is can be very frustrating for the reader. But I don't mind that because I don't like. It's like when you and I were championing the Tim Heidecker movie, The Comedy, and like other people that we're friends with. Like was just like, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you guys. Yeah. This is like unwatchable. Like 80% of the people, I'm going to say 98% of the people that I know, if I gave them a Blake Butler book, they would just be like, this does nothing for me.
Let's do one of his for the book I want to read something if he's written.
Okay.
Also, go Hawks.
Go Hawks. I don't think that Blake will actually hear this.
I don't think so either. But
go ahead.
Megan likes my tweets on Twitter, so she's at least still in our sphere to a certain extent. And if she ever comes up in New Jersey, Megan, if you're listening to this, you are invited to the Quadrant, which by this point we will have theoretically have completed.
February 25th, baby.
God, I hope it happens.
Yeah, keep going with Meg. Sorry, Meg. We derailed.
Gonna derail one more time. So next week's the Quadrant. Last night I did the Hot Ones challenge because my friend had a birthday party for her husband. And so she bought the Hot Ones, the 10 wing sauces.
Mm-hmm.
Bad idea.
Yeah, that show is like Diarrhea City, man. I would fucking like...
This morning was not good.
I would bleed out if I went on that show. Let's get back to talking about the Holocaust.
Well, I said to Egg on Instagram when I messaged her, I'm like, hey, you got 2 hours. I'm like, I already got the end of your email. All in all, the Holocaust was bad. But she did not end that way. Okay. I also like the inclusion of the German words, although some were so close that at first I thought it was a weird stylistic choice to make some English words look like German, like selection with a K.
Mm.
I think it's just like the language, being like interested in language, right? Like it's just like that's the same Latin root or who knows what. I don't know. Most of the violence, Egg writes, of this novel was either stuff that happened off page or was metaphorical. Like I think the part where the rat ate the soldier's foot was most explicitly gory part, unless my brain glazed over something worse, which might be possible. Like, obviously, there are people going to the gas chambers within the novel, but the horrors of those deaths are largely implied rather than written out, which we talked about a little bit.
Yeah, because it reflects the everyday existence of your German citizens.
It was chilling in the way that most of the characters spoke about the Holocaust. It usually followed the same cycle of, quote, I don't hate the Jews. Something had to be done with them, but this is too much, which is almost verbatim what you said.
Yeah.
And then in addition...
I also found that remarkable.
In addition to that, the characters usually focus on talking about, quote, waste of resources instead of human life because they do not consider the Jewish people to be, quote, human life. Which is also ironic because one of the characters even says, I'm not proud of saying this, but I was personally quite relieved when they brought in the star. Otherwise, how can you tell?
Yeah, that's another, right, because you can't. I mean, like obviously, like there are like features that are genetic, but like those are also fucking German genetic features in a lot of these cases.
Well, it's also like the whole thing is like it's an internal belief system, right? Like it's
yeah, and like largely, there is. It's complicated, but a lot of Judaism was racialized by the Holocaust because it's like it got turned into a thing where it was like about whether or not you have a drop of blood, like in a similar way to slavery.
I really like the background fall of the Third Reich and the hubris that happens subtly throughout the course of the novel, like characters talking about fighting in Stalingrad as if it were a decisive victory, but I as a reader know that it was a well-known Nazi defeat. And then after that, there were some truly insane things like the cosmic ice theory. That was crazy. The naming conventions, like, oh, so this is okay. I wanted to bring this up. The naming conventions, like all boys getting named Adolf and children getting renamed if there was a Nazi enemy with the same given name, and abolishing the German alphabet. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. Did you hear like this week in North Korea, Kim Jong-un, I think, had a kid, and like they made it a law that you can't name your kid his daughter's name. And I'm thinking about in this book, it's just like, no, everyone has to be named Adolf.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's just like the opposite. It's like the one dictator's like, only me. And then he's just like, only everybody.
Yeah. No, that's, and you've seen like I don't think there are that many people named Adolf now, right? It's like one of those names. It's one of those names that's like off the table.
Didn't stop Michael Jordan from trying the mustache though.
Okay.
In almost also, there's like the photo of him at the end of the novel. It's like, oh yeah.
I thought you were talking about Michael Jordan.
Yeah, he's in the book too.
What if the novel ended with the crying Jordan meme? What if the last page of the novel was just crying Jordan?
Mike knows what's up.
Would that be the best ending of all? It's like that Kevin Smith bit, whatever. Like the Kevin Smith bit about how like he wishes that Lord of the Rings just ended with them just like fucking. It's like, man, that would have really that movie would have cemented itself in history if it had ended that way. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
I read this 300-page book about like how like the inner workings of the concentration camps, and then the last page just a picture of the crying Jordan meme. It's all set in the 40s.
They have to put a disclaimer in the beginning to be like, this is not a printing error. We tried to talk him out of it. He said no. The only way that we could end this book is with the crying Jordan meme.
You know what? The only thing that would make that better is if there was like an Amygdalatropolis like analytical essay at the beginning, a 25 about, but they don't. She doesn't like the author doesn't explain what they're writing about, and you're like, what the fuck could this possibly be about? Some readers found the choice puzzling, but I just like Nazi stuff. No, it's just Jordan, man.
It's Jordan.
All right,
the greatest of all time.
If Martin Amis responds to my email, that's the only question we're going to ask him. Bring him on here. Like, why?
There's like 0% chance he knows what the crying Jordan meme is.
Well, we can say, why didn't you put a picture of Michael Jordan in your book? And he's like, what? We're like, thank you for your time. In almost a parallel to that, Egg says, was the feeling toward Der Stürmer. At first, it was seen as something, quote, good, but in the end, it was said to be the reason that anti-Semitism didn't catch on in the West. That's like the writing, right? The pamphlet or something.
I found that really interesting, too, because I knew what Der Stürmer was, but I had no idea that that's like the arc that it had. I thought it was like, you know, the main outlet for Nazi propaganda. I didn't know that it was viewed as a failure or something like that.
She says, I didn't really buy that Thompson was in love with Hannah. It felt like everything he did had an ulterior motive, like he was helping her because of his lust for her, not because he was a good person. But I liked his growth and I found that believable. In the end, when he was giving Hannah a hard time for not wanting to be with him, kind of felt icky to me, but also felt complicated in an interesting way.
I agree, but I also agree. I also like, I feel like I sympathize with Thompson less than you. Like I the whole time I was pretty conscious that he was a bad dude. And
no, I mean, I don't think I wasn't like sympathizing with him, but he is comparatively, like he is designed to be comparatively a good guy.
Yeah,
right?
That's definitely what's going on. Yeah, he's the protagonist of the novel.
And I don't sympathize with him, but it does feel like they have a connection. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's maybe like not that there's like she was still in the shit too, but like he's never going to be able to leave that place. Neither of them are going to be able to leave the place. And I can see why he's like, he wants her because she will help him remember a better time, but he only it doesn't work in reverse. Like whatever. Something jarring I noticed with Dahl's section was that anytime a number was mentioned, a numeral was used, even when the phrase was something like one of them, or like second, but two and I noticed this too. And then he felt the need to keep repeating he was normal, which definitely felt more like the character needing to convince himself more than the reader. I initially put in my notes that it was ironic for him to label his daughter cruel when she didn't want to hug him, but when I look back on it, it feels just more like an example of him being in positions of power over women.
Yeah, there's also that shit in the very beginning where he's like, he's like, daddy knows, like, can read your mind or something like that. And he's like, I know what, like, color underwear you have on. It's like very weird.
Yes.
It's very weird.
Like Ignatius Riley having sex with dogs.
That was, right.
No, but like there is like perverted shit where it's just like there's no, it's almost too much where it's like, no, he's a literal Nazi. Like we don't need to like have him as like a pederast too or something.
It's like how all Stephen King's characters are like
either pure good or pure evil.
No, but like they're like they'll be murderous like people who like beat their wives and literally like have demons like enter their bodies to so that they can like rape every single person, but then they also have to say the N-words so that you know that they're bad.
Yeah.
Like that's like a consistent theme in Stephen King. Like it's like, oh, he's doing all these things, but then also he's racist.
Yeah. Here's the thing that I highlighted that I think highlights or it, exemplifies what Egg was showing. This is from Dahl. I see I'd better have a brood about this. I'll sleep in the dressing room as usual and tackle Hannah in the morning. Because he's talking about how he's going to have sex with her and then he like, whatever. One, numeral, of those ones, numeral, where you slip in beside them whilst they're all warm and somnolent and ease up against them and into them. I won't stand for any hogwash. And then we'll both be in excellent spirits for our little gathering here at the villa. For I am a normal man with normal needs. I am completely normal. This is what nobody seems to understand. Paul Dahl is completely normal.
Yeah, he's Patrick Bateman, right?
Mm-hmm. But it's also like, there's another thing that I thought was funny, but it's also like, Jesus Christ, where I think it might be like directly, I think it's like the paragraph before maybe. It's like, there's nothing, Kathy, shout out. There's nothing wrong with Hannah, the good old 15 centimeters won't cure. When after a final glass or two of Martell, I wend my way to the bedroom, she should be suitably prompt in the performance of her spousal duty. If I do encounter any nonsense, I will simply invoke that magic name, Dieter Kruger, for I am a normal man with normal needs.
Do some like a conversion here. What's 15 centimeters?
30 centimeters is a foot, so that's 6 inches.
All right.
Normal, average.
Yeah.
The old 15 centimeters. I think it's funny that it's in metric. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the metric system is objectively funnier than.
Yeah, like giving all 6 inches, like all right, but like the old 15 centimeters is like pretty funny.
Yeah.
I wanted Dahl to suffer more. I wanted Shmuel to kill him. I also like that he just dies off screen. Like, screen the wrong word.
He's not given he's not given like a villain's death or a hero's death. He's given the death that many nameless Nazis were given.
I wanted Shmuel to kill him, but I understand why Amos didn't have that happen. It was interesting to me that Shmuel was the most poetic of the three, but it makes sense because the intense trauma he's been through means it makes sense that he's not thinking or narrating in a linear sense. That's an interesting point. That he's like just so far gone that it's just like abstract ideas. The biggest gut punch in the novel was the line, "I'm no longer afraid of death, though I am still afraid of dying. I am afraid of dying because it is going to hurt. That's all that's attaching me to life. The fact that leaving it is going to hurt." He talks about like how like the quickest death is 60 seconds and it's going to be brutal 60 seconds.
It's very, very similar to the line in Frankenstein when the monster is talking about how like basically the same thing. He's like, man, like if I weren't afraid of, like I don't understand death aside from being afraid of it. And if I weren't afraid of it, I would happily die. Something like that. And it's
Mary Shelley, man. One of the real ones. Mm-hmm. All in all, Egg says, a great novel, and I'm glad I read it. I know that she and I started the book before you did. We were like, this is a lot.
Yeah, it's intense. It's an intense book.
And she was also like, do you read this book? I'm like, no, what's that about? She's like, the Holocaust. I'm like, no, like I don't choose.
What book was it?
I can find out. Hold on.
It better not be The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
There's a non-zero.
I'll lose my fucking mind.
There's a non-zero chance it's that. Hold on. No, All the Light We Cannot See.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can talk about that after.
She's like, have you read that? I'm like, no. Why do you ask? She says, it's another Holocaust book, but it's from the perspective of a girl living in France and a boy living in Germany.
Anthony Doerr, right?
It was a very trendy book, and I didn't pick it up. But then my aunt sent it to me. It was really, really good.
Yeah.
And then we thanked you for thrusting us into the narrative that we didn't want to be part of.
I have a story about All the Light We Cannot See that I'll tell off air.
Just bleep the whole thing. Well, that's the email. If you want to email in lottery@cageclub.me, we appreciate it. Again, any of these books, we did the preview episode, all 12 books this season. Any of how many books have we done so far? 10, about 25, we're closing in on 50 books that we've covered for this.
Holy shit.
I think.
That's pretty good.
So.
It's more than most people have read in their entire lives.
Yeah, we've done this in 2 years.
Cool.
So.
What about that scene where she's reading the letter and the guy's looking at her on the toilet?
Oh, wait, like through the peephole.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he
looks at her on the toilet too. That's another, like, he's a normal man, right?
With normal needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like she's in there. He's like, I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna go have sex with my wife in the bathroom because I know she wants it. And he like looks in and like she's like excitedly reading a letter. He's like, Thompson. And he's like, wait a minute, Kruger?
Yeah.
Anyway, keep reading.
The crime is selecting Jason Tatum, Ja Morant, Donovan Mitchell, Lauri Markkanen, and
people would be like, what the
and someone else that I can't remember when you could have had Embiid, Joker, Kyrie, Luka, and that's it, right? Anyway, I'm upset beyond measure.
I think this is, if I did this right, this is like our 45th-ish book.
Okay.
Bye.
What a man! They fight each other, the police state wins! Stop your backs and trash our holes! Trash your bank if you got real balls! There's nothing left to go, so cool! Real life seems like new school, like